Good morning, everybody. So we are here to talk about a very interesting topic today, and it's something it's been coming in from all sectors, into my awareness, and so I obviously I'm supposed to talk about it today. So I've had a couple conversations. I read something about it in a book. It's just been popping up, and that thing is motivation, right? So motivation is a very broad term, right? And people will use that word, and it can mean a couple different things. But ultimately, motivation is whatever fuels you to get things done, right? Now, there are two kinds of motivation, right? One is discipline, right, which is where you just summon up the willpower to make things happen. And the other is inspiration, where you really are just driven by this desire to do it and you don't have to put work into it. You just go, right? And so actually, I have a coach that I know, and the term she uses for these are hustle and flow. So one is, hustle and grit and working hard and doing what you don't want to do because, you've got that determination and that discipline and all that kind of stuff. And then the other is kind of, flowing with what you're meant to do and with your purpose in the universe and all this other kind of stuff, right? So those are the two things, right? Now, a lot of people will think that one of these is better than the other, or well, normally what happens is people will say, hey, listen, the people who are hustle fans will say, hey, listen, the whole idea of this inspiration, all this kind of stuff is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, that's not true, but there are people who will say that. And then the people who, just want to flow with the universe, the inspiration fans will say, hey, listen, this whole discipline, doing what you want to do, it'll kill you, it's horrible, all this kind of stuff, right? And so there's kind of like this clash, right, where people will say, well, one's right and the other's wrong. Or they'll say, hey, listen, one works for me and the other doesn't, right? I'm just going to do my thing on one side because that's what works for me. And the truth is that all of that's wrong. The truth is that every single one of us needs both, right? So let me give you some examples and we'll kind of talk through this, go over why everybody needs both. And then we'll talk about how to cultivate and build and do all that kind of stuff to get each one, how you can bring each of those into your own life. So first, let's talk about discipline, right? The hustle, all that kind of stuff. Now, discipline is great because if you don't, there are going to be things in life that you don't want to do, right? And, delayed gratification, pushing through, you can get a bigger reward if you suffer a little bit in the beginning. That's the whole principle of life, that we're taught when we're very young, right? That said, if that's the only thing you live by, life sucks, right? That's just what it is. There are a lot of people, and this is a message. This is core to what I say: is that you don't have to hate hate what you do until the day that you die. You don't have to be out there and say, hey, I'm going to work and work and work and work and work and suffer, and then when I'm 70, I'll take some time to enjoy stuff. Like, my core message is that's not necessary. And there are cultures where that's what's encouraged. That's what's almost required, right? So for example, in Japan, right, people are expected to work themselves into the ground, to hustle themselves into the ground, to have that discipline into the ground, so much so that they have a word for death by working too much. The word is karoshi. And so if you live only in that discipline, then you suck the love out of life. You suck the joy out of life. And then what's the point, right? Sure, you got stuff done, but at what cost, right? It's not worth it. On the other hand, living solely by inspiration, unless you've gotten to the point where that's enough to fuel everything, living solely by inspiration is generally not something that works. So I'll give you a good example. When I started this company, what inspires me is to teach. What inspires me is to learn, right? That's what I love to do. But the truth is I had to learn marketing, right? I don't like marketing. I don't like sales. I don't like any of that stuff. But I had to learn it because if I didn't, then my message and what I want to do was never going to work. It was never going to be profitable. It was never going to reach people. And so I had to use discipline to get through, doing things that I didn't really want to do. Now I know somebody else and she's very amazing at what she does, but she also doesn't like marketing. And she's, keeps telling herself, hey, listen, I'm just going to make enough money at what I do that I can hire somebody to do that for me. But since she never learns in the first place, she never makes that much money, which means that she never has enough money to hire anybody. So she's caught in this catch-22, right? So in your journey of following your inspiration, there are going to be things that are hard. There's going to be points of sacrifice. There's going to be stuff that you don't want to do. And that's where you need the discipline to push through, right? Now, ideally, now that we've talked about like what both of those are and why we need both, ideally, if you utilize discipline in the beginning, then you can begin crafting your lifestyle and setting up systems and setting up an environment where you can function entirely from inspiration. Because inspiration isn't just a one-time thing. Somebody told me recently, said, inspiration is what gets you started. Discipline is what keeps you going. And to some extent, that's true. But inspiration can keep coming. It can keep happening at multiple points in the process, right? And that's something that's really powerful. I mean, every time I get an email from somebody saying, thank you, Sean, you've helped me so much. You've changed my life. That, bam, boost of re-inspiration, right? And so what you can do is you can craft your life. You can set it up so that you get that inspiration on a daily basis or even multiple times a day. And then you just, then you can solely rely on doing what you love. You can solely rely on the passion and the enthusiasm. But the truth is, to get there, to get to that point, does require discipline. It may require discipline in terms of the external work of going and getting that job or building your business. It's certainly going to require discipline when it comes to the internal work, when it comes to facing your demons, when it comes to going inside and culling away all the crap that's accumulated over the years. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to tap into that inspiration. So you need a mix of both. And the more that you use discipline in the right direction, right? Not just using it to just keep going, but the more that you use it to get to this point where you can rely on inspiration entirely, that's kind of the journey you want to take. Now, let's talk about how to get both discipline and inspiration. Okay, because discipline is something you build, right? It's something where every time you have a hard call to make, you make the hard call. Every time you're in that position, right, you push through, you work hard, grit, hustle, all that kind of stuff. And science has shown that willpower is like a muscle. So the more you use it, it will deplete. And then when it comes back, it'll come back a little bit stronger. It's just like going to the gym, right? So, you deplete your willpower and then you build it back up. You deplete it and you build it back up and higher and higher and higher. And you develop that amount of discipline that you can push through anything. And a good example of this would be Navy SEALs, right? Those guys have wills of iron, right? Because they've gone through so much. I mean, that's the whole point of the training that they do, right? Is you either flake out and you're done, or you come out with a massive amount of willpower, right? And so that's how you build discipline. But inspiration is not like that. Inspiration, it's more like a plant. You can plant it, it's like a tree or bamboo or an oak tree or whatever, right? You can't force the tree to grow. You can't sit there and be like, come on, plant, grow faster, right? There's nothing you can do to speed that up. There's nothing you can do. It's something that happens. It's something that happens outside of you, right? Now, what you can do is you can set up an environment that is conducive to that plant growing. You can set up an environment that's conducive to your inspiration, right? And some of that comes in the external. And this is where we talked about using the discipline to set up an external environment that works. And then a lot of it's the internal, right? You've got to go in and you've got to dissolve the stress and the anger and the guilt and the fear and the grief. You've got to overcome your conditioned behaviors that aren't serving you. You've got to understand your mind, all this kind of stuff. And when you go in and you do that, you lay the foundation for that inspiration to grow. And it will. That's the thing, is I can tell you, I've walked people through this process. If you set up the right environment, it will grow, right? It's just as surely as if you put an acorn in the ground and you set up the right environment, you'll get an oak tree. Like, it's just, that's how nature works, right? And it's the same thing with inspiration, but you can't force it. Okay, guys? So that's discipline and inspiration, right? Motivation, it breaks down into those two. That's why you need both. That's why every single one of us needs both, right? And that's why it's important. And that's how you go about it. That's how you go about building discipline. And it's how you go about cultivating inspiration. And I say cultivating, I choose that word very specifically, right? Because of that example of the plant. So if you guys are interested in that, if you guys are interested in, hey, listen, I'm looking to cultivate that inspiration. I'm looking to get some help, because especially diving in and doing the internal work is really hard to do. But, if you've got the right expertise and you've got the right system, then you can set it up, just like you can scientifically set it up so that you have an environment that's conducive for a plant to grow, right? You can set it up so that it happens, and then you can tap into your purpose, and you can take more and more of your life and have it be more built on inspiration than by discipline, right? And that's not saying that, hey, listen, you're never going to need discipline, but it is to say that it's a lot more enjoyable when that's what you're living, and that you use discipline in the beginning, and then slowly inspiration takes over and over and over and over until that's how you're living your life every day, day in and day out. So if you guys want help with that, then go to this link. It's www.oculusinstitute.com/scheduling. I'll get on the phone with you. We can talk about what's going on in your career. We can talk about where you want to go. We can talk about what's in the way, and we can get you on that path to where you are living by inspiration. And frankly, I'm going to check in and make sure that you have the discipline to get there, right? I want to make sure you've got the discipline so that you can do the work in the beginning, so that you can follow the system, and that we can get to the point where we can get you to where you're really inspired, and that's how you're living your life. So guys, I look forward to speaking with you. I hope you enjoyed today, and I will talk to you soon. Farewell.